going to look at Metasploit's command line interface, or MSF CLI. We are back at Kelly's main command line. We're outside of MSF console. We want to do MSF CLI and then -H to get the help information. So what we want to do here is actually create our Metasploit module all in one line. So instead of doing use, module name, show options, set any relevant, set a payload, set any options for that, and then finally say exploit or run, we are actually going to do it all in one line. This is, I've found to be useful for two different things. One, if you want to use Metasploit with a tool like my smartphone pen test framework, whenever it interacts with Metasploit, I use the command line interface, since it allows me to do everything in one line, so it's very scriptable for use in programs. So I know a lot of other tools do the same thing, use a command line interface, so it's worth knowing if you ever build any tools that are going to interact with Metasploit, and many of them do, since Metasploit is a very powerful standard in information security. Also, if you are building Metasploit modules, which again we will write one of our own in the exploit development section, if you are like me and make syntax errors when you are programming, which many programmers do, you will have to, if you use MSF console, you'll have to reload the entire module tree every time, which you can do from MSF console to take into account the changes you made when you try and fix the syntax. But with MSF CLI, you can just hit the up arrow to get the previous command, so I think it's a little bit faster. In general, it's a little bit slower, as you'll see, because it does, like I said, load the module tree every time we run it. But for exploit development, for building Metasploit modules, I've found this a little bit faster, so I prefer it in that case. But again, generally I use MSF console, so we're just going to use MSF CLI briefly and see how to do it. So here we have our options that we can use here. So basically, again, what we want to do is create our exploit or our auxiliary or our handler, anything we want to do with the Metasploit module all in one line. So we are going to set our options like this, option equals value. So instead of set option and then value with spaces, we'll just say option equals value. And then finally we'll put the mode. So we see all our modes down here. Some of them we've seen before, like options, payload, summary, that's like info, and targets. So we've seen those, so instead of saying show options or show payloads or show targets or info, we can use these modes at the end, so big O, big P, big S, big T. We also have execute, so that's like saying exploit or run, help, we're looking at that as it says. Some of the other ones we will see in the class, like advanced, we haven't seen those yet, check, we'll see that. But we aren't going to need those here, so what we want to do first is come up with a module we want to use. Let's stick with that exploit Windows SMB MS08 underscore 067 underscore net API. So the same one we used previously when we did our MSF console exploit. I don't want to give away too many of the vulnerabilities that are actually here. We will work through finding them, so we'll just stick with this one that we know is here for now. And we can see our options with a big O, so we can ask it the options, but we know we also need to set a payload, and we are going to have to set options for that payload as well, so we can actually save ourselves a step if we just go ahead and ask what the payloads are. And we can skip all of these intermediate steps. In fact, if you're doing this inside of a script, you will. If you're going to run a specific exploit, you will know what those options are. As you use, for instance, MS08067 net API over and over again, you'll become familiar what the options are, what the payload you want to use is, and what its options are as well. But there are many Metasploit modules, so it's always good to know how we can ask. So our goal here is to make it all one line in the end, but we can use these mode flags to help us out. So let's start with the big P, ask it what its payloads are. We used Windows shell bind underscore TCP in our previous example. So we can use any of these payloads that come up. So we should see lots of Windows payloads here. And that is, again, loading the module tree on the fly here, whereas with MSF console, it's a bit faster because it loads the module tree at the beginning and keeps it loaded. So you can look through this list. I encourage you to spend some time trying different payloads. But let's just set payload equals, again, as option equals, and then what we want to set it to. So Windows, let's do shell reverse underscore TCP. So again, with the 2 sliders, so this is going to be staged. We have payload equals Windows shell reverse underscore TCP. And now we can do that big O to ask for the options, and now this will show us the options for both the module, the exploit, MSO8067, and the payload, so the Windows shell reverse TCP. So I just kind of skipped a step here. So we could have asked for the options first and then set a payload, but this way we can get all the options in one step. And again, we can skip these steps as we become more familiar with it. You can just go ahead and write everything out without asking it anything if you're able. So, familiar here, our host, so that's going to be the IP address of Windows XP. Our port 445, SMB pipe is browser. We now know that that is correct from the auxiliary module we ran in the previous video. So, only thing we need to set down here with the payload, lhost. It also has lport, so that's going to be the port to listen on, and lhost, unlike with our bind shell where it just had the port to open the shell on, so 4444 by default on that as well. Lhost is going to be the host to call back to, so we need to give it the IP address of Kali in this case. You could set up a listener somewhere else, like in the EC2 instance in the cloud if you want to. It doesn't necessarily have to call back to the same Metasploit instance that we used to set it up, but that's what we'll do here. We'll just have it call back to Kali. So let's see, what is Kali's IP address? A very good question. In my case, 192.168.1.77. Again, yours is probably different. So let's get rid of this big O here. And I do need to set our host equals to the IP address of our XP machine. So in my case, it's 192.168.1.76. I actually started typing in IP addresses from the other network. Haven't gotten to that one yet. There's a second network lying around here. So set our host, our port, and SMB pipe are fine. So let's set lhost equal to that IP address of our Kali machine. So 192.168.1.77 in my case. And we can set lport if we want to, change it from 4444. We know how to do that same way. Lport equals, and then whatever port we want. But it looks good to me. Let's go ahead and run it. So we do E for execute to run it. So from here, it should work the same way as MSF console. It should set up a payload handler, this time for our reverse payload. Be able to handle the staged payload. But it does need to load the module tree first, so again, MSF console a little bit faster. And there we go, we should have a new shell here. So it's a slight thing with Metasploit. Occasionally it seems to not actually give us the prompt, so it should show us that C Windows System 32 here. Just go ahead and abort it with Control-C and try it again, see if it works this time. I don't see that happening with Meterpreter, and we will use Meterpreter extensively. Occasionally with the command shells that happens. I like to start with the command shells. See, there we go. C Windows System 32. So now we have a prompt and we can start running system commands like net user. See our users. So any Windows commands that we want. We are system, so we should have access to everything. And you can again Control-C to get rid of it. So very similar to MSF console. Really the whole point is that we now have the ability to run things in one line, so we can script it. So my main usage for it is for scripting inside of other programs when I want to talk to Metasploit. So I think it's worth knowing, but again, we will spend most of our time in our MSF console when we use Metasploit in this class.